Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Ramadan Journey. We are delighted to have you with us for the second year of this program. Unfortunately, this year, Brother Zafar Bangash, who was the host of the program last year, he will not be able to join us this year. We hope that he'll be back for future editions of this program. This particular year, I am going to be your host. My name is Afif Khan, and we'll be going through 29 or 30 programs this Ramadan. And in order to have a nice journey, it's important to have a guide. And so on this particular journey this year, we have along with us a traveling companion. Many of you are very well acquainted with him. You've attended his lectures. You're also aware of the tafsir that he's writing. And of course, I'm speaking about Imam Muhammad al-Asi. He is currently working on the Ascendant Quran, realigning man to the divine power culture. Currently, he is about halfway through in writing this tafsir. It's the first ever tafsir of the Quran written directly in the English language. Again, he is about halfway through. My participation in this project with regard to the tafsir is that I'm the editor. So he does the writing and I do the editing. We've been working with each other for about 5 years now. Currently, about 7 volumes are in print. We expect that within the next 4 to 6 months, we'll have the next 3 volumes out. And so by the end of the year, inshallah, we're going to have about 10 volumes done, and that'll take us through the tafsir of Surah Al-Ma'idah. As far as the Ramadan program this year is concerned, we are going to be talking about various aspects of Ramadan for about 10 to 12 programs. We'll start in a general sense, and then we'll get into some specific details about the ayat for Ramadan. Then we'll talk about some very pertinent issues that pertain to the Muslims. We'll talk about the issue of women. We'll talk about Yom al-Quds. We'll talk about Muslim unity. We'll talk about the Hajj. And in addition, we'll spend some number of programs on what this new tafsir is all about. So as we begin Ramadan, all of us are going to be fasting, and so it's important for us to understand why we fast, what the benefits of fasting are, and what we ought to be responsible for during the month of Ramadan. And so with that, we'll just go ahead and get started with this very first program. Welcome, Imam Asi.
Thank you very much.
In this first particular program, what we're going to be talking about are some general aspects of Ramadan. We'll just sort of take a broad overview of what the month means and what Muslim responsibilities in the month are. And so we've heard, as far as fasting in general is concerned, there are obvious health benefits that are associated with fasting, both mentally and physically. But many of these benefits from a scientific point of view, they're only sort of characteristic of the modernity. Much scientific research has been done about fasting. But none of this research was available 1400 years ago. And so as far as the Muslims fasting in Ramadan, do they take a health-conscious approach to fasting in Ramadan? Or are there things or aspects of Ramadan which are a lot more fundamental than simply the health benefits?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ihtada bihudah. To answer your question, Brother Afif, the month of Ramadan is a time period in which Muslims honor part of their pledge and their covenant with Allah, most exalted, most merciful. You see, a Muslim's relationship with Allah is a relationship of lifelong commitment. And that covers all the activities and all the efforts that are exhibited in a lifespan. Part of that, obviously, is fasting. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Creator, He created us and He knows how to guide us in this life. And so in this final scripture that He has revealed to us and to humanity, He outlines a general program for life. And part of that program is the fasting of the month of Ramadan, which in and of itself is part of our commitment to our only Creator. And so when we visit the verses in the Quran that speak and detail the month-long fast, when we think about these verses, we realize that they begin with the wording, and it's a common phrase in the Quran. It says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who are firmly committed to Allah's authority, to Allah's power. So when we who are listening, we the Muslims, when we are listening to this, we realize that what is to follow is part of our commitment, part of our iman to Allah Jalla wa Ala. So when we fast, we are doing this not specifically for health purposes. We are doing this in our proper relationship with our Creator. And the benefits of this are all inclusive. They include the human body, they include the human mind, they include the human spirit, etc. So the range of benefits cover the whole human spectrum. And part of that is the health benefits that accrue from this month-long fast.
This is all very interesting. I'd like to, in the next segment, talk to you about whether this is a voluntary commitment or whether this is something which is a requirement. That's all the time that we have for this particular segment. Please come back and join us in the next segment.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. Thank you again for joining in with us. In the last segment, we were discussing some general aspects of Ramadan, and we got started by talking about certain health benefits. And what was more important in the last segment is that we were talking about the more fundamental reasons for why Muslims fast. What I'd like to ask you now is that while the commitment to accept Allah as our sole deity and authority is voluntary, nobody is forcing us to enter into that commitment, but once you make that commitment, the necessity to fast is not voluntary. That is something which becomes a requirement. True?
Yeah, that's true. There's no... The word Islam itself means submitting to God's guidance and will. So once that is done, that submission takes on the added responsibilities of the commitment that comes with that submission.
There's a program that you have to follow then.
Yeah, you can say it's a program, sure. Some people don't like to place structure in Islam. But no problem, you can say it's a program just for the purposes of delineating or explaining what God's guidance means in human life. And as we were saying previously, that fasting is part of this. And the fast that has been outlined in the Quran is explained to us in the verses in the second chapter of the Quran. And may I add here that there are other dietary guidelines in the Quran. It's not just fasting that we are speaking about. That's certainly an important element in the overall guidelines that we have in the faultless Quran.
When we talk about fasting, many of us understand that it's an abstinence from food and drink. But then when you extend this for the course of an entire month, to an ordinary person it might appear to be very, very hard. And so is fasting every day for 1 month consistent with the capacities of human nature? Or is it something, as some of Islamic detractors say, is it something that's meant to torture the human being in order to please a very needy God?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of accusations out there, and there's a lot of finger pointing at Muslims and at Islam, saying that Islam is a harsh religion, or Islam is a very demanding way of life, and these types of things. But anyone who takes a very calm and a very calculated approach to the original and the foundational meanings of the Quran and the Sunnah, they will find that it actually goes side by side with human nature. It doesn't conflict with human nature, unlike other philosophies and other religions and other ways of life. Islam is a comfortable fit for our God-given human nature. It's Allah who created us, and it is Allah who prescribes for us conducts in life that are suitable to the capacities and the limitations within which we live. There's an ayah in the Quran that says, وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Allah has not placed upon you a burden in matters pertaining to deen. And this is applicable to the subject matter that we are speaking about, i.e. fasting the month of Ramadan. The way it has been delineated and defined fits very comfortably in the capacity of what we can tolerate and what we cannot tolerate. Some people may think, oh my God, these Muslims are fasting from, or for, in some places, 16 hours a day, in some places more than that. See, it depends on where you are on earth, because the fasting of the day is precisely during the daylight hours. And so in some geographies of the world, it becomes more than 16 or 17 hours. In other geographies of the world, it could be as little as 10 or 9 hours. So there's a range of daytime that we are speaking about. So when a person is looking at this from the outside, especially a non-Muslim who has never fasted, meaning they haven't abstained from water and food and nutrients throughout these daylight hours, they say, my God, this is really hard. I mean, did God mean that we suffer to this extent? And it's not really suffering to any extent. An average and healthy human being can endure this fast. And Muslims are proof positive of this because they've been fasting for all of these centuries.
One thing that comes to mind in this regard, when you sort of try to push yourself to your capacity or to your limits, is the training of world-class athletes or professional sports teams. In these particular instances, a particular athlete, in order to train him to be able to perform at a world-class level, to run faster, to jump higher, or to lift more weight, or to participate in team activities so that you can win, say, at the Super Bowl level or at the World Cup level, these athletes have to be very highly conditioned to be able to withstand the rigors of competing in a world-class match. And so their coaches, they say that they push them to the limit, meaning that these athletes begin to get an understanding of what their capabilities and their limits are. And oftentimes you have to go to the limit in order to win. And so is fasting something similar to that, that we are acquainted with what our capacities are as human beings?
That's a very, very good way of putting it. And the key word here to zero in on is the limits of the human body. You were speaking about athletes. Athletes are basically concerned with their physical body. When we're speaking about fasting, not only are we concerned with the physical body, we're also concerned with the spiritual component of our existence, as well as the mental component of our existence. And this fasting takes us to the capacity frontiers in these three realms, so that the best out of our combined elements sparkles after our fast.
Okay. We need to continue this in the next segment. We need to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, we were talking about Ramadan and fasting, allowing the Muslim to explore his mental and physical frontiers. And in this particular segment, we'll try to segue into helping the non-Muslim members of our audience to understand what Muslims actually have to do while they're fasting in Ramadan. Insofar as the audience here is concerned, we probably have a very large segment of non-Muslims. They might especially be paying attention to us Muslims during Ramadan. And there might be a lot of new Muslims who are part of this audience. And so it's important to acquaint them with what the basic mechanics of fasting are, what responsibilities a Muslim is expected to discharge during Ramadan. So if you could briefly acquaint us with what those are, with a view to sort of connecting it to what these mental and physical frontiers are.
Well, this is going to be a crash course on fasting here, to go through the physical details of what it means to fast. Well, it's this way. A person, a Muslim obviously, expresses his intention or her intention at the beginning of the month of Ramadan, just before the first day that he or she is intending to fast the whole month of Ramadan.
Does this apply to children also, or just?
No, children are children. It's left up to them whether they want to fast or not want to fast. It's a voluntary thing. It's not mandatory upon children. It's mandatory upon individuals who reach the age of responsibility or the age of puberty. That's when fasting is due upon every Muslim. And so that means that from a period of about 1 hour before sunrise throughout all of the day until the beginning of night. Some would say that begins with sunset, and some say that begins with the visualization of stars in the heavens. And whatever the case is, it could be in climates of the world, in seasons of the world, where it's winter time, the days are shorter, obviously, have on the average a 10-hour day. And so people will fast those 10 hours. Not eating, not drinking, not inhaling any substance, whether it's tobacco or whatever, and not having any, in the case of marriage, a couple are married, not having any sexual intercourse during that time period.
Yeah, so if we can just hang on there for just a second before we continue. Many people understand that when we're talking about fasting, we're talking about abstaining from food. And so we might throw in abstaining from liquids also, and people might be able to accept that. Although not drinking anything throughout the day is very hard for some people to accept. But nonetheless, it doesn't fall, too far outside of the general category of eating and drinking. But when Allah Ta'ala throws in this idea of abstaining from sexual activity, most people are not acquainted with this being part of a fast. And so as far as Islamic fast is concerned, these are the three main abstentions in the Islamic fast. And so how does abstaining from food and water tie in to abstaining from sexual activity?
Well, I can answer that in two ways. The first way is if we're looking at fasting strictly from a physiological or a biological point of view, the human body. In this area, fasting, not the Islamic fast, but the general fasting, has been subjected to some studies by those who are in, generally speaking, the medical professions, in nutrition, in biology, etc. They've looked at this, at the general aspect of fasting. They found out that there's a lot of benefits to this, to the human body. But when it comes to the Islamic fast per se, there hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, any rigorous research done to try to shed light on what is the total benefit of defining a fast, not only in abstaining from the nutrients, the ingested nutrients, but also abstaining from sexual intercourse.
You mean that after 1400 years, there hasn't been any investigation by Muslims, to explore this particular connection?
Yeah. I want to ask pardon of the non-Muslims who are tuned in and want to divulge an observation, and that is the Muslims who are supposed to be practicing their fast have been delinquent concerning studying what they are doing. There haven't been any, especially in the last century or so, when these studies have reached an advanced stage, laboratory studies, scientific studies, medical studies, nutritional studies. There haven't been any significant effort done by Muslims to shed light on what it means to observe this Islamic fast. This is how delinquent we have been, and I'd like to express my sorrow at the fact that Muslims have not been up to date with what they are practicing. Many Muslims, even if they happen to be doctors, specifically in the fields that we are talking about, I guess it hasn't occurred to them that why can't we pool our resources as physicians in this world and have a collective mind and bring this collective mind into a laboratory setup and try to investigate, research, and ponder what the meanings of this fast, this combined fast, the Islamic fast, means to our human life, vitality, health, and well-being.
This is also interesting. I wish we had more time to continue this discussion. That seems to be all the time that we have today. We hope that you join in again with us tomorrow. We're going to continue this discussion, and we're going to go actually in much, much more depth in the succeeding discussions about Ramadan. We hope that you come back and join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel. And if should you like to go into these details in a little bit more depth, we'd like you to explore the Ascendant Quran. As we had said earlier, 7 volumes are now available. It goes into a lot more depth with regard to the discussion that we had today. We feel that you'll find it to be really interesting. The particular discussion that we had today is pertaining to Volume 2. And so with that, we'll conclude our Ramadan journey for today. And inshallah, we'll see you again tomorrow. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.